Hi, my name is Colin Schoenfeld, and this is my final presentation for POS 435, Women in Politics, responding to Prompt 1. And Prompt 1 is all about differing ambition levels between men and women in politics. I believe that the main reason for this is gender roles, which are an old concept which tell how men and women should and should not act in society. Men have the role of the primary provider, which means they're supposed to provide for the family and be tough and, kind of unforgiving. Whereas women aren't supposed to be the caregiver, they're all supposed to be about relationships and emotions, and, this doesn't really mesh with reality and, in fact, often hurts both genders more than it helps them. And it's particularly bad for women in politics because it A, kind of discourages the idea of women getting into politics in the first place, and B, if a woman politician is to run, then if they don't care for their family, then they suffer a public backlash, which is not the same for men, because if men sacrifice their family, then they tend to be held up as, oh, look how much they gave to the cost. Now, both these are nonsensical, but, people will be people. And this affects the public in a few negative ways. The primary one I've noticed is that women's issues are not really given as much relevancy as males' issues. There are less female politicians, so less people to bring up female issues, and that means that not only do they get no attention, not as many people in general know how to deal with female issues, which is not really helping us advance as a society at all. The second is that it lessens the exchange of ideas. Now, many would say that the exchange of ideas is nothing large, but in a country as often politically divided as we are, it's actually a rather large factor. We need more exchange of ideas going, not less. So, less exchange of ideas will probably just cause a widening gyre of political sides. The third is that it kind of keeps us just going down the same path that we have been going down. America was supposed to be a country all about changing how things worked in a country up till then. And we did, back then. Nowadays, we're not so great at it. We kind of just follow the same path as everybody else. Sometimes not as well as everybody else. All of Europe and Canada all have better representation and rights for women, whereas the US, we're still kind of fumbling about for it. Now, I believe there are a couple ways that you could fix this. The first is that you could, change media standards. I mean that both in news and entertainment, but mostly in news. You can't really change entertainment too much without becoming propaganda. But for news, you could create a council that would punish stations and anchors for subscribing to stereotypes or reporting inaccurate information, something along those lines. For my other suggestion is that you could run a serious female political candidate with no ties to previous male politicians, which is why I don't think Hillary's a really good example of this strategy. She's not bad. She would certainly help the gender roles be thrown out of whack, but not as much because there were people who will just say that she is only the first female president because her husband was president and she used his connections to break into politics. And, not really true, but people will still say it anyway. But I think without the male connection, then, you seriously undercut a lot of the critics of a female president. I only believe that running the female candidate is probably the better option. We could eventually change media standards over the long term, but it would be over the long term. It's not a very effective way to do it, because it would take just so much time and effort to make sure that you have all the rules in place and deal with the corruption and just everything that can potentially go wrong with a new body when it's first created. So compare that to running a female candidate, which can be done every 4 years, and, one is enough to effectively change how people view women, at least to some degree. I think a rather large degree. And thank you for your time. This has been my presentation.